Hey there, and welcome to another B.Hooked tutorial. I'm so excited about this one today because I made an adorable, if I do say so myself, crochet unicorn for my little niece. I used Bernat baby blanket yarn. It's super soft, super squishy, and that's why I was given the name Cuddles, because it's just that cuddly. So in order to start off with this pattern, you're going to need a few supplies. You can find the supplies list at bhookedcrochet.com/cuddles. Now on that page, you will find the written instructions, and you will want to follow step by step with that pattern. Now in this tutorial, I'm going to discuss all of the major techniques that you need to know to make each of your body components or the elements of Cuddles. And then we're going to focus a lot about the assembly, because that's the point at which you can really make or break your project. You can make the perfect body elements, but when you put them together, if it looks funny, it kind of ruins the whole project, right? All right, so find that free pattern, gather your supplies, and let's see about those techniques. So each one of our body components is going to start off with the magic ring. So we're going to demonstrate that here. And to do the magic ring, you need to set yourself up so you're holding on to the tail here in your dominant hand. And you want to just have 2 fingers ready. We're going to wrap it around those 2 fingers 2 times coming towards us. And you want to leave yourself a little tail. Now pinch that off with your thumb. And now in the background, I want to point out that I'm holding on to it here with my ring finger. I'm just really keeping some tension on there. And then you'll slide your hook underneath both of those 2 strands, just kind of in between those 2 fingers. Then you want to hook this back piece. We're going to pull it underneath this one here. You might have to kind of wiggle it around to make that happen. And now your work looks like this. And then raise up your pinky and your ring finger back there so you can yarn over and pull a loop through this that's on our hook. Now we're almost finished, believe it or not, with the setup of the magic ring. We just need to do that one more time. So yarn over with your working yarn and pull through. We're creating a chain there, basically just getting us some height. That chain is not counting as a single crochet. But now we're ready to start on that first round. So working like this is going to be kind of awkward. So what we need to do is set ourselves up so that we can just have easier access to our working yarn and we can see the opening of the ring that we're working into. Now you carefully want to slide your 2 fingers out of that ring, but leave it so that you can still see the ring. The tail is still laying over the side like this, and then you can just gather up your working yarn. And I do tend to stick these 2 fingers through the ring just so I know where to work. And then I'm going to make a single crochet. So I'm catching the ring, so this strand is really the ring, and then this one here is the tail. So I'm catching both of those under my hook as I do a single crochet. We want to do 6 of these. So that's the first one. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And when we're ready to fasten up the magic ring, so here's where the magic part comes in. We need to take that tail and pull it. And we do have to pull a little bit tight because this yarn is fuzzy, and we have to pull probably a little harder than we normally would with a smooth yarn. But once you pull that, it's going to fasten it up and it'll look just like this. Now we need to finish things off by starting on the next round. So this is actually round number 1 for all of the body components that we have, but since we're not joining at the end of each round, we're going to continue on with round number 2 by making a single crochet in our first single crochet. Now you can find the V right there. I'll put my hook under both of those and single crochet, and this stitch here is going to be the first stitch of the next round. So what I recommend doing is placing a stitch marker here. Now before we move on to round number 2 of the component that we're making here, I want to show you what we're working on. So this is the back leg, and although this looks pretty simple, it actually demonstrates every single one of the techniques that you need to know to complete your unicorn. So up until this point, we have just finished the very middle here down at the bottom, the magic ring. The next thing we're going to talk about are the increases, and that's going to get our foot just a little bit bigger. And then we're going to incorporate and learn a little bit about decreasing and color changes right here. We'll work up a little bit more, and then we'll see some more decreasing and how to stuff this thing, because there is a little bit of strategy involved in that, believe it or not. And the final thing we're going to cover is all of those finishing techniques. That's really where most of the trouble people have is really just putting everything together and making it look just right. So the way we left things off in that final segment is we worked our first stitch in round 2. Now increases are really quite simple. All we're doing is making 2 stitches into 1. We're always working with single crochet stitches for this particular pattern. So whenever we need to increase, all we need to do is make 2 single crochets into 1. So we're following the standard rules of single crocheting in the round, and that means for round number 2, we need to increase every stitch. So we had a total of 6 single crochets in our first round, and so increasing every stitch is going to double our count, right? So we're going to count out 12 stitches at the end of this round. So the first thing I want to do is find where my first stitch is coming from. The stitch marker here does a lot of help with that. I can see this is kind of the front part of my single crochet, and I really just want to follow that lead there to insert my hook and single crochet in that same space. Now probably one of the most challenging things you're going to find is being able to see your stitches, count them, and know exactly where to put them, because the yarn is a little bit fuzzy. And I'll be honest, this is both a good thing and a bad thing that the yarn is fuzzy. It's maybe not such a great thing that it makes it harder for us to see our stitches, but it helps us in that it hides mistakes very well. So if you make a little goof, honestly, it's not too big of a deal. As long as your stitch count is right, the placement of it is a little less important. So the next thing I want to do is find my next stitch. And what I like to do is really just try to find those V's. Now they're not really defined V's like they are with a smooth yarn, but you can see these 2 lines right here. Now I know that that is my next stitch, and so I just want to feel around to stick my hook in there, and I want to increase on this stitch too. So that means I'm going to make 2 single crochets into this stitch. Now I have a total of 4, and I do keep a mental tab of how many stitches I have, but if you do need to count them, I recommend flipping it over so that you can see the top part of the stitch and try to find your V's or your 2 lines. So this is going to be the first stitch, and then 2, 3, and the 4th one is kind of hidden there underneath my hook. Now just to reiterate a little bit about increasing, because we are going to do it a little bit. We don't have to increase too much for each one of the body components, but there are going to be 2 to 3 rounds where we increase. And so you're going to need to get comfortable with this idea of making 2 single crochets in 1. Now we're just working on the feet here, so we only have a couple of increase rounds to go, but on the body and on the head, you will need to increase a little bit more. And so what I would recommend for those is just to make sure that you are counting your stitches at the end of each round to make sure you're on the right track, because it's very easy to get distracted. So I'm going to do that here because I was talking as I was crocheting. Let's see if I did it right. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Wow, I actually didn't miss one there as I was chatting with you. So that completes round number 2. Now increasing in the round says that we need to do things a little bit differently from one round to the next. We need to evenly space out our increases so that it stays round and flat. The pattern is worded in such a way that it'll say just make 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And that's how you know that you're increasing, and it's that simple. So what I'm going to do is finish up my increasing rounds on this hoof, and then we'll talk about our next technique, which is going to be the decreases. Now here is what my hoof looks like at the end of round number 4. I have a total of 24 stitches, and I'm ready to move on to the next round. However, the next round we're not going to increase anymore. All we need to do is make 1 single crochet into each stitch. We're going to do that for 3 rounds. And when we do that, it's going to start working its way up. Now, as it sits right now, it kind of wants to be a little lumpy and bumpy, and that's okay. We'll work it out as we go along. But ideally, we want it to sit like this, so that this is the right side. This is kind of the bottom of the hoof, so it's basically right here. And then we're going to continue working around and around with this showing as our right side, because you can see that the stitches look different on the back side. Now the other thing you'll notice is that it's kind of pointed and a little bit misshapen down at the bottom. And I'll be honest, it's going to do that, and that's okay. That's how this one started out too. But we'll get a little bit creative with our shaping as we work the next few rounds. And that's all you need to do at this point. Go ahead and work up 3 rounds of single crochet where you do not increase, and just carry your stitch marker as you go. So you see I just released it, made my first stitch, and then I will insert my stitch marker there in the first stitch and continue on. Just keep a mental tab of which round you're on. We want to make 3 just like this. So off camera, I went ahead and finished up those 3 rounds of single crochet where I did not increase at all. You can see each one of those here. And we're up to round 7 now for our hoof. We just have 1 more round left to go. We're going to do a little bit of shaping. We're going to do so by decreasing. So at this point, we've covered the magic ring down at the bottom. Every single one of your body components is going to start off with a magic ring. We've talked about increasing, and yes, every single one of our body components is going to increase at some point or another. We've worked just this little flat section, and most of our body parts are going to incorporate some of this. And now we're going to talk about the decreases, and most of our body components are going to utilize decreases as well. We're going to use a stitch called the single crochet 2 together, and it's very simple. So I'm going to set myself up on round 8, and the first thing I want to do is make 2 single crochets. So 1 into each of the next 2. On that first one, I'm going to pause just to place my stitch marker there once again. I do want to keep track of what stitch I'm on. Make 1 more single crochet. So I've made 2 stitches, and now I'm ready to do the single crochet 2 together. And just to let you know, we do have to decrease in the same increment that we increased here on this our last increasing round, and that's just to make things a little bit more uniform. So that's where those 2 single crochets are coming in. Now to do the single crochet 2 together, we're going to find our next stitch. You'll insert your hook there, yarn over, and pull up a loop, and then you'll leave it right there. Now normally to finish our single crochet, we would yarn over and pull through each of these 2, but we're going to leave it there, find the next stitch, insert our hook into that one, yarn over, and pull up another loop. So now we have a total of 3 loops on our hook, and now we can finish the stitch with a yarn over and pull through all 3. So what we've done with that is we have decreased our stitch count by 1 because we've turned 2 stitches into 1. Now our repeat for this particular round is to continue with 1 single crochet into each of the next 2, and then single crochet 2 together once again. So we're decreasing again. Now depending on which body component you're working on, you're just going to follow right along with the pattern. It's going to tell you exactly how many stitches you need to make in between your decreases, and all you have to do is follow that. It's going to be the same obviously for all of the feet, but the head and the body are going to be a little bit different. So we're ready now to change colors from the blue to the white. And the first thing I can do is just go ahead and trim this working yarn, this blue working yarn. And I'm just going to leave myself a shorter tail. Honestly, we're not going to weave this in, so it's okay if we have a shorter one. We just want to have enough to tie it off on the inside, because this is going to live inside, and so we don't have to weave it in. And then the next thing I want to do is just release my stitch marker for a moment. I'm going to just stick my hook into that next stitch. Now I'm not going to do anything with this here. I want to use my new yarn, and same thing, you leave yourself a tail that's a few inches long, just long enough to tie off, and fold it over, place that on your hook, and then use that to pull it through. So now we have a blue wrap and a white wrap, and we just want to pull the white one through the blue one. So basically what we're doing here is a slip stitch, and that's because we have a little bit of a jog, because as we work in a spiral, at the beginning of the round is shorter here. This is the beginning of the round, this is the end, and so there's a little bit of a jog, and by slip stitching we can sort of force this higher edge down a little bit, and then it's not quite as noticeable. So here is what the color jog correction looks like here on the finished one. We can see it just slightly, and because of that I like to keep this part on the inside if possible when I'm putting this thing together. So our stitch pattern from here on out is actually quite simple. We're just going to make one single crochet into every stitch around using that new color. So I'm just going to single crochet right there and continue on. So one single crochet into every stitch. Nothing new here. You guys are pro at this by now. I'm going to work up a few stitches, and what I want to show you next is how to make the shaping a little bit better on the foot. So I'm going to leave these tails just kind of right here out of the way. Try to kind of poke this through so you can see it. This is the tail from the very beginning, so from our magic ring. I want to use this tail and place it on a darning needle. And the goal here is to kind of push it inward like this. And since we don't have to make the inside of each of our little body components perfect, what I'm going to do is just use this tail to secure it to the side so that I'm kind of forcing it to stay up in this motion or in that placement like that. And so I put it into place, and then I'm just going to grab a couple of stitches from anywhere. It honestly doesn't matter where you secure it to, but you'll kind of pull it and just eyeball it. You want to make sure that you're pulling it tight enough so that it stays in the position that you want. But of course, like the more I pull on this, the more it's going to tuck in. So just like I said, eyeball it. Try to make sure all four of your legs are in the same position. And once you have that squared away, then we can use these tails to tie it off. So what this is doing is securing the new shape of the bottom, but it's also securing this color join here. So I'm just making a knot on the inside, and then I can tuck them in, and I never have to see them again. I don't have to weave them in, and I can just keep going with my foot. Now for each one of our back legs, because these are just slightly shorter than the front legs because of the way we want the unicorn to kind of sit, we're going to make 11 rounds of single crochet with our new color here. And we're not increasing, we're not decreasing, we're not doing anything other than making one single crochet into every stitch. Now once we get done with this, we will do just a little bit more shaping as we get to the top of the leg. And that covers all of your techniques that you need to know to make the other body components. So what we're going to do next is I will work up the rest of my leg. I want to show you what it looks like. We'll talk about stuffing it. And then I want to give you a rundown of what each one of the body components looks like, so you have a little visual reference to make sure you're on the right track. And then we'll start putting our unicorn together. So the trick to stuffing each one of your legs is that you don't stuff too much. Now first what I'm going to do is get a nice big piece and just kind of shove it all the way down into the hoof area. And kind of working it down in there is really going to give you the best result. We do want this part of the foot, the hoof, to be kind of the most dense. So we're going to get as much stuffing in there as we can. And then once you get a nice piece in there, just go ahead and kind of squish it and work it around. That's going to help evenly distribute. You want to Make sure you have your shaping that's still kind of tucked in like that. And as you work up, you're going to thin out the amount of stuffing that you have at the top part of the leg. Now this one is already stuffed, and the stuffing really stops at about right here, and this is just hollow. It's really just the yarn at this point. And this has enough thickness in it that it still feels very stuffed because it's such a fluffy, soft yarn. But it's thin enough that it's going to, one, allow us to attach it to the body better, but it's also going to make it lay a little bit better. Now, if you think about how this is going to come together, so if the body's right here, the closer that we can get this part to the body, the better it's going to lay. Now, if we were to stuff it as thick as this part down here, then we're going to have a big body here, and we're going to have this big leg that kind of sticks out. So the idea is to just sort of allow it to gradually get bigger from the point at which it attaches to the body all the way down. So that's the goal. Now, believe it or not, you actually have all of the techniques that you need to know in order to crochet all 9 body elements of Cuddles. So once you get all of those elements crocheted and you're ready to assemble things, I first want to point out that there is a good order in which Cuddles comes together. So in order for certain parts to look their best, we need to attach them in a certain order. So what I did was I started first with the body. And you can leave the hole up here at the beginning. It's totally fine. We're going to cover that up. You don't have to seam anything together there. Well, from the body, we're going to first attach the front legs. Once you have the front legs attached, you can go ahead and attach the back legs. And then I moved on to the head. Now the main thing you want to make sure is that you attach the head after the front legs. So honestly, if you want to do the back legs first, it's not a big deal. You just want to make sure that you have those front legs in place before you attach the head, because the head is going to be sewn over top of those front legs. Now once you have all of your legs and your head, everything sewn into place, it's really just the fine details from there. I personally like to add the facial components. So in our case, we have the ears, and we have a horn, and then we have the eyes that we embroider on. I like to have the entire body constructed before I add those details, because then you can really see if things are coming together straight and uniform, and you can make any tweaks if you need to. If, say, for some reason your head didn't quite want to sit straight and it might be a little bit crooked, you can sort of make up for those things in this stage. Now I will point out that we do have a couple of holes in our body components. So we have the hole here for the head. You can go ahead and seam that up with your tail. And same thing for all 4 of the legs. We can go ahead and close up those ends. Honestly, I just used a simple whip stitch technique to kind of go over those few stitches and close up that gap so the stuffing doesn't come out. And the ears and the horn, we're actually going to use the hole to help sew it into place. All right, so now that you have all of that in clear understanding, let's go ahead and see how it's done in the tutorial. So after we have both of our front legs attached, it should look something like this. I'm going to use my body tail now to attach the head. I have each of my tails from the legs. I'm going to leave them there just in case I need them for anything else before I trim them off. And the first thing you'll need to do to sew on your head, honestly, is just find the best position of it. Now we don't really want to match the hole on the back here. We'll actually close that up in just a moment once we have it sewn on. We don't want to attach that directly like this, because then its head will be kind of funny. So we need to kind of position it down a little bit and angle it in the way that you want before you start sewing it on. When you're ready to add the back legs, we're going to need a long piece of yarn that's threaded on a darning needle that's going to fit through your buttonhole. So that's kind of the big thing here, because these legs are going to be relatively functional. So the front legs we sewed on and they don't move, right? They kind of have a little bit of play in them just because the fabric is flexible, but they don't swivel back and forth. And that's what we're going to do with the back legs, because we want them to kind of help support the unicorn when it's kind of sitting in that upright position. So the first thing we need to do is figure out exactly where we want them to be placed, and you might have to play around with this. The other thing I want to point out is just if you're keeping track of those jogs, I'm keeping them towards the inside, so I'm just going to keep that in mind. Now once you have that spot squared away, we're not going to use the button yet. Go ahead and stick your darning needle in one side, and now here's where things get a little bit difficult. I'm having to squish this all the way across, and I'm feeling over on the back side for the needle to pop back out the other side. Now when you're happy with your placement, you're going to work with your two tails. This was the initial tail that I left from the beginning, and then this is the tail that's remaining. I'm just going to tie them in a knot. And the tightness that you kind of add here, however tight you make this knot, that's how much it's going to pull in. See how it's kind of pulled the body in a little bit, and that gives it a nice shaping element to it. So you do want to have some of that, but I don't want it to be too much. So I might just find a happy medium and go ahead and tie this in a knot. We still want it to swivel a little bit, right? We want the legs to be movable like they are here. So when you get to the point where you are completely finished with one of the tails, we can't really weave it in along the back side of the work because of course it's inside and we can't actually get to that. So what I do is just work it down into the middle. I'll kind of cross it around a little bit, just weaving it in that manner. And then you can go ahead and just trim it off. So I've already made my cuts of yarn as the pattern has indicated. Again, you're going to just eyeball this. The thicker your mane, obviously the more cuts you'll make. If you want it a little bit thinner, you'll make fewer. So we're going to use the horn as our guiding point. We basically want to find the middle point in between the two ears and the middle behind the head. We're going to start here with the mane and go all the way down and cover up some of the arms back here. Actually, this is more the straight. I've got the head turned here so you can see it on camera. But the first thing we want to do is just take our crochet hook and put it underneath a stitch. Could be any stitch, doesn't really matter in this case. And you'll hook your piece of yarn onto that and pull it through. Now you want to pull it so that it's about center, and then double knot it. So knot once and then twice. And then move on to the next. Adding the mane and tail is just this simple. I hope you had as much fun as I did for making your cuddles. If you have any questions whatsoever, I'm here for you. Just go ahead and leave your question or your comment on the pattern page over on my website. You can access that once again at BHookedCrochet.com/cuddles. And I would absolutely love for you to share your photos with me on social. You can get so creative with the color choices, and I really look forward to seeing what you come up with. So you can find me on Instagram at B.Hooked and on Facebook at B.Hooked Crochet. Now I also want to mention that if you're working on Cuddles as a gift for somebody, there's a really great baby blanket pattern that matches Cuddles perfectly. Now you can find that over on my website. It's actually a Yarnspirations pattern, but I filmed a tutorial for it, and it's very quick and easy because we use this same yarn. It's the simple chevron crocheted baby blanket by Yarnspirations, and you can find my tutorial over on my website. If you're brand new to the channel and you're making it all the way to this point in the video, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you. I appreciate your time and attention today, and if you liked this video, if you got some great information out of it, if you loved your cuddles, go ahead and hit that like button. That lets me know that I'm making the projects that matter to you. Now the last thing I would ask of you is that if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the B.Hooked YouTube channel. When you do that, it lets YouTube know that this is a great channel for learning crochet techniques, knitting techniques, and all of the inspiration that comes with that. I want to thank you once again. I appreciate you so much, and I look forward to serving you in the next video.